What you're about to hear is the story of a film being made, but being made totally different than any other film that I've ever been in. It started really in a very unusual manner. I had made my career in international films in London, and then the French discovered me. And I was in a French film together with Charles Aznavour and Lino Ventura. I had just finished at the studio at Boulogne, the last day of shooting, and I was on my way to the airport that evening to meet Howard Hawks and John Wayne at Arusha near Kilimanjaro to go into a film called Hatari. So I get out of the studio, and it's dark, and I hear a voice saying that he was going to stop me leaving Paris. And I thought that was a very interesting kind of an opening. And I saw the man. He was short. He was dressed in black. He has a black hat on. His hair was white. I saw that when he took his hat off, and he said to me, "Allow me that I introduce myself." And he said that in French, although before he had said he would stop me from leaving Paris in German. And he said his name was Romain Pinez. He originally came from Russia. And when I saw his face, he had this wonderful Russian Jewish face. And he said, I came to offer you a film that is going to be the most beautiful film you have ever been in. Now, I've had heard that before, but he was such a very interesting character that I began to listen. And he said, this is going to be a love story between a man and an 11-year-old girl. That was already a little strange. But he said, I won't tell you the story. I want the director to tell you the story. His name is Serge Bourguignon. He has never made a long métrage, a feature film, but he had won the Palme d'Or in Cannes for his court métrage, his documentary, Le Sourire. I'd seen the film and it was beautiful. So he said, but before I give you the story, I have to be absolutely honest, because Serge Bourguignon doesn't want you to play the part. He wants Steve McQueen. And I said, well, he must be a man of taste, because that's a wonderful actor. And then the man in the dark, he said, yes, he is a wonderful actor, but I need a man with warm eyes. And Steve McQueen doesn't have warm eyes. And besides, he's much too expensive. I cannot afford him. He had a vedette américaine, and I got an American star, and I cannot pay an American. I found out that I can pay you, but I couldn't pay the other guy. So I began to be interested in this man because it was the most unusual approach. And he said, do an old fellow like me, do me a favor, have dinner with me at Fouquet's. It's a famous restaurant on the Champs-Élysées at Avenue Georges V. And I know that there is a flight leaving early in the morning to Cairo and then on to Nairobi. And when you are going to meet on Monday morning, John Wayne and Howard Hawks, you are not late. But I will have the chance for you to see the director. And he looked at his watch, the guy did, and he said, I have noticed now that you have been listening to me for 15 minutes, and you have not said one word. And you have these warm eyes. So when Serge Bourguignon will see your silence and has to live with your silence and with your warm eyes, he will never mention Steve McQueen again. So please have dinner with me and him. So I couldn't say no. And we got to Fouquet's, and he introduced Serge to me. And then, Romain Pinès, he said, "Oh, I have to go to my office. I have to talk to Bertrand to book you into the morning flight, Air France, to Cairo." And what actually happened, I didn't know it then, was he didn't have an office. So his office was the men's toilet of the Fouquet's restaurant. And the man who was running this men's toilet down there, his name was Bertrand, and he made him his assistant. So whenever the phone rang, then Bertrand would answer and would hand the telephone either to Romain, or he would say, "Oh, no, Monsieur is with his stars up at the restaurant, and he will call you back." And so when he said, "Oh, I have to talk to Bertrand, he has to change the flight," and so on, he walked down there, and I didn't know, I thought he walked to his office. And the first thing that Serge then said when we were alone at the table, he said, "I want you to know one important thing. I want Steve McQueen for the part. I don't want you." I was impressed by that because I'd never met a director who would talk to me like that. Then when he said, "I want Steve McQueen," and I said, "Well, that's your problem." And that was a sentence from a film that he also remembered. Anyway, I said, the only thing I said to him is, "Tell me the story." So he began to tell me the story. And it was a story of an American fighter pilot, and I think it was Korea, who was shot down and crashed. And the last thing he saw was, before he crashed, was a girl on the ground, a local girl. And during that crash, or because of it, he had lost his memory. He had become an amnesiac. He couldn't remember his name, he couldn't remember Korea, he couldn't remember wherever he came from. And he was living with a nurse who had helped him back to life at the field hospital. And they had become lovers, and she looked after him. And he had the mind of a 15-year-old. He was physically a man of 30, 35, but his mind was childish. So they had a love affair, and every morning when she had to go to work, he walked her to the train station outside Paris. It's a town called Ville d'Avray. That's why the film was then called Les Dimanches de Ville d'Avray. And one evening when he went there to pick up his girlfriend from the train, he saw that a man brought a young girl, 10, 11, 12 years old, out of the train, and she was crying. She didn't want to be taken to an orphanage, and he said she had to. And Pierre, he was following these two, the man and his daughter, and he had brought her to an orphanage. And he had to promise to come back and pick her up every Sunday. So the next Sunday, Pierre, who had followed all this, he was so fascinated by this little girl that he went there and wanted to see her.
Bonjour, papa.
Monsieur, ramenez-la à 7 heures, pas plus tard. Et laissez le portail ouvert, s'il vous plaît.
And the nuns who were running this orphanage thought he was the father. So he picked her up at the orphanage every Sunday. So it is really a love story of two children, although the man looked like a man, Pierre looked like a man. And Serge at Fouquet's told me the story till the very end, and I was fascinated. I was fascinated by Serge. I was fascinated by the way he talked to me and how he had envisioned this film, this story. I was taken by it. And that evening at Fouquet's became the evening of an everlasting friendship between Serge Bourguignon and me. So I agreed to do the film, and I flew to East Africa to do the film with John Wayne and Howard Hawks directing. Hatari is a film of game catchers. They are catching wild animals for European and American zoos. And John Wayne and I did our own stunts catching animals. I felt like a 15-year-old boy. It was wonderful. But I kept also thinking of this little girl, which I envisioned somehow what she would look like. And then when, after 5 months, we had done all the game catching, we had to fly to Hollywood to do the interior scenes at the studio. But I went to Howard Hawks and said, I cannot fly with you straight to Los Angeles. I have to go via Paris. And he said, okay, there's time, take your time. And Serge had written in the meantime the screenplay. And during the night flight, I read the screenplay. It was the most beautiful screenplay I could possibly imagine of a love story. And when I was finished in Hollywood with it, I came back to Paris, and Romain told me he was very sad he couldn't get it financed. He had 6 other French producers, so they were altogether 7. They put the little bit of money they had, their savings, put into the film, but that was only 25% of the budget. And he couldn't find the other 75%. And in the course of the conversation, he said, if I could only find an old friend of mine, Sam Spiegel, but he has disappeared doing a picture, Lawrence of Arabia, and I don't know where he is. And I said, Sam is in London. He said, you know him? I said, I know him very well, because I lived in London, I was working in London. He took me out to dinner quite often, and Romain said, you write him a telegram, and the telegram reads, Dear Sam, your old friend, Romain Pinès, has a fantastic project. Can you do me a favor and see the director? And Sam agreed to it, to my telegram, and Serge flew to see him in London, waited till he had read the script. Sam Spiegel loved it, and he owned 80% of the British Columbia company. So he spoke to a man called Frankovich, and he said, you better finance it, do that film with Hardy and the little girl. And there's a fascinating young director to do it. So we got the money, we did the film, and Serge never had to say anything to me. I had read the script, and he had written the script so beautifully that I know his thinking. And I just did without thinking about it.
Pourquoi elle pleure?
Oh, c'est rien, ça passera.
Il ne faut pas qu'elle pleure.
Je vous en prie, monsieur, je sais ce que j'ai à faire. Allez, viens maintenant, ça suffit.
Another important impression that I would like to talk about is what I thought when I saw how Serge and Henri Descartes, as cinematographer, had worked out their shots, the images of the ponds and the clouds. There was poetry in each and every shot. I've never seen anything in black and white where poetry was throughout the film. What also surprised me was when Serge, the first time at Fouquet's, said, oh, by the way, I'm going to shoot the picture in black and white and going to film it in winter because I want the film to look like a Japanese watercolor. And he did. Serge had found a girl who was just a dream. She looked exactly as I had envisioned her. Till this very day, I don't know how that is possible. And it was a very, very clean, beautiful love, as only two children can be in love with each other. No sex, nothing. And when we worked together the film, she in real life, she was 11, 12 years old, she fell in love with me. She didn't play the part, she lived it. It was just unbelievable. And I had to be very careful because I knew the film was going to end one day, and then I disappear out of her life. And she never left my side. She went home in the evening and so on, but she couldn't wait till the next morning for us to be together again. I knew that I had to leave. I had to do, I was producing a film in Berlin after that and play in it. So I had to prepare her very carefully, the fact that we had to part. So I talked to her and I said, you see, the one thing with films is us actors, we hate to leave each other, and there are usually tears at the end. But we have to go on living, and the same thing is going to happen to us. So I stayed, because Patricia Gozzi is her name. Patricia's mother said to me, don't leave immediately. Stay a little while without filming. The film has been done. Stay a little while and be very nice to her so that she understands one day she is going to lose you, which I did. Serge and Romain called me in Berlin and said, come and see the film. I saw the film. It was the most beautiful love story that I could possibly imagine. Whatever I've been trying to do in this film, we got it done. It was just the most incredible, I use that word, I know, quite often, but the film was fantastic. Serge had done a masterpiece of a film. We were happy, and I knew we were going to have a real success on our hands, but I was wrong, because that Frankovich, he hated the film. He sat through it for the projection for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then stopped it, and he said, this is the most boring film I ever saw. And you shouldn't do that to me, because I can bore myself without seeing this film. I mean, how do you bring me from London to Paris to see this? Forget about it. And these 7 producers, Romain and the 6 others, couldn't understand what that was. And Romain explained to them what the Americans in Hollywood are calling is the film is shelved. All of us were of the opinion, that's it. We had a beautiful film that nobody will ever see. Now, I have to make a little detour here. I'm a flyboy. I've been flying gliders since I was 13 years old. I did long distance flights. I flew from Hamburg to Kilimanjaro. I bought the farm that we had filmed Atari in, because I was so taken by Africa. I lived there for the next 20 years in the bush. And quite frankly, I had forgotten about Les Dimanches de Villeneuve. And I remember, as long as I live, a moment, I got the people to give me some newspapers, and I had the New York Times. I took a bath and a drink, and I looked at the feuilleton, and I saw my name. And there was the most fantastic ad for the film, which was called Sundays in Cybele. It was like a Giacometti had done the ad. I saw my name, and I knew the film was in New York at the Fine Arts Cinema. I got out of the bath, I got into the nearest plane that I could get, and I flew to New York, and I saw the film in the Fine Arts Cinema Richard Davis is the name, who rescued the film and put it into his fine art cinema. And when I saw the film with an audience, it was a young audience, I must admit, I had to cry. And it was just too much to bear. So the film became an enormous success. The Fine Arts Cinema ran it for 1 year. It ran in an opening house in Tokyo for 1 year, in London 8 months, in South Africa for 6 months, and so on. France nominated it for an Oscar, Academy Award. And Serge and Romain went to Hollywood, to Los Angeles. I was living at the farm, and I was waiting. Are we going to get the Oscar, yes or no? And there was no telephone in my bush farm building, but there was a shortwave band radio at the town Arusha, and they called me and said, we have a telegram here. Mon très cher Hardy, and the rest was in English. We have won the Oscar. I was sitting in Africa, just almost looking at Kilimanjaro, and we had an Oscar. I mean, it was almost too much to bear. Every little detail that Serge has done was perfect. Nicole Courcelle, a wonderful actress who played the nurse, the French nurse, had done a fantastic job. And this girl was a dream. I was waiting when I saw the film for the first time with an audience at the Fine Arts Cinema. I was afraid there was going to come a moment where I'd say, oh, that scene wasn't too good. Didn't happen. I'm of the opinion this is one of the most beautiful films ever made, and I'm most grateful to Romain Pines and to Serge Bourguignon and to the little girl that I was invited to play in it.